Hi everyone, this is Leah Jiang from Xiaomi Vela team. It's a pleasure to participate in NuttX online workshop this year. In my presentation, I'll share some of the enhancements we've made to the NuttX graphic and input subsystems over the past 2 years. I'll walk you through today's presentation in 4 parts: driving framework and device driver enhancement, tools enhancement, input offloading technology, landed products, and future planning. Okay, let's get started with the first part. We've made the enhancements to both the driver framework and device drivers. On one hand, we've improved the rendering efficiency, and on the other hand, we've also expanded the functionality. Alright, let's dive into the de-vsync optimization first. In the original framework, the rendering uses the timer and trigger rendering upsets. The problem was the software timer performed unreliably. It has a jitter delay of few milliseconds. Now we've adopted the dynamic vsync mechanism to achieve more precise timing and improve rendering efficiency. First, we enabled hardware vsync poll mode, which gives us much more accurate rendering timing. We also implemented a vsync buffer queue. Normally, rendering is driven by vsync signals. If a frame takes longer than 16 milliseconds to render, it'll miss the next vsync circle and cause jank. But here's what we leveraged. On MIPI DSI-based LCDs, transmitting a frame buffer usually takes less than 16 milliseconds. That means we can borrow some actual time for rendering. To be specific, when rendering finishes, the frame buffer is pushed into the queue. Once the display's controller finishes transmitting the frame, it removes the buffer from the queue. As soon as a rendering thread detects an empty buffer, it starts rendering right away. Here's a diagram to help illustrate the difference. On the left, you have the timer-driven approach. The horizontal axis represents time. The software timer triggers at regular intervals, but due to the jitter around 1 to 2 milliseconds, the rendering doesn't align perfectly with the actual hardware vsync signal. If rendering isn't finished by the next vsync, the frame gets dropped. On the right, we have the de-vsync optimization. When the hardware vsync signal comes in, it actively notifies the renderer while polling. Once notified, the renderer starts rendering buff1. Meanwhile, once transmission is complete, the LCDs remove the buffer buff0 from the queue and again pause to notify the renderer. As soon as the renderer becomes idle, it immediately starts rendering the next frame, buff0. This way, buff0 gains actual rendering time, which improves rendering efficiency well. Additionally, we've enhanced the input subsystems with grab capability. When the approach sends a grab command via IO control function to globally capture input events, the input driver will stop delivering those events to any other application. This is especially useful in scenarios like watch, suspend, and resume. We want input date to be exclusively handled by the process that manages suspend and resume operations, instead of being passed to the UI layer. This prevents accidental UI interactions and ensures both accuracy during power state changes and overall device security. Another typical use case is in heterogeneous multiprocessor OS. We support input offloading. When the big core sends a grab command to take exclusively control of input date, the little core will no longer receive any input events. This way, even though both cores share the same input hardware, they operate independently without interference. Currently, our grab capability is consistent with the standard Linux input grab behavior. It already supports grabbing for both touch and mouse input devices. Alright, so next up, let's going to talk about the enhancements we've made on the device driver side. To better support the emulation of graphics applications, we've added two new drivers, a frame buffer driver called the virtual GPU and a new input driver, both based on the virtual version 1.2. Here's how we implemented them. Starting with the virtual GPU, the driver first gets the displaying information from the QEMU backend, things like screen resolution X and Y. Then it sets up a double frame buffer for the graphics application. Once rendering is complete, the driver sends a flush command through the virtual transport layer. This command basically tells QEMU to update the frame buffer now. Now for the input driver, Virtual uses the Linux input event format, which is different from how NuttX defines input events. So our virtual input driver acts like a translator. It receives those Linux-style events, converts them into a NuttX compatible touch, mouse, and keyboard events, and then passes them up to the higher layers. Last year, we implemented the Goldfish frame buffer driver. To get better display performance on the emulator, especially when using custom skin styles, we needed to enable GPU capabilities on the host side. So this year, we've gone a step further and implemented a Goldfish GPU frame buffer driver based on the EGL remote controller protocol. This driver processes join requests from the guest side by leveraging the host GPU capability. What's key here is that it can combine the custom skin styles with the guest side buffer contacted directly on the host. This makes the emulator's appearance look much closer to the real physical device. And now, we've added support for both the RGB AAA8 and RGB 565 color format. And as you can see, the video on the right shows the emulator running with smartwatch skin applied. Next, let's move on to the part 2, tool enhancements. This year, we focused mainly on enhancing tools related to monkey and input. We built a better command line debug tool called getEvent. It's mainly used for real-time monitoring and displaying events from input devices like touchscreens, keyboards, and mice. The core features of getEvent include automatic device discovery. By default, it scans the device directory and monitors all detected input devices. Targeted device monitoring, you can also choose to monitor one or more specific devices through command line options. Multi-touch capture. thus capturing data like coordinates and timestamp for each touch point. We use a non-blocking mode with a 500 milliseconds timeout. This prevents the system from hanging while waiting for events. Going forward, we'll add support for outputting more information for the input devices. The screenshot on the right shows get event automatically detecting device nodes and displaying information about the identified input devices. Additionally, to better serve automated testing scenarios, we've optimized our original Monkey framework. The key change here was extracting the event conversion and device manager functions, then turning them into a separate input generator library. This modular way doesn't just make it easier to maintain, it also makes the input functionality more reusable across different testing tools and apps. This library supports a full set of standardized input operations, basic gestures like taps, drags, and long presses, plus device-specific interactions such as smartwatch crown rotation and crown taps. It even allows the custom gesture, which tells us accurately simulator complete user behaviors during automated testing. As you can see in the diagram on the right, when the Monkey tool or other native apps called the input generator library, the library writes the input date to the virtual input device you input. From here, the LVGL graphics library reads and processes these inputs just like they are coming from basic hardware, making sure we get accurate, reliable UI responses during testing. Next, I'd like to talk about the work we've done in input offloading. On a heterogeneous multiprocessor OS, we let big and little core share one input hardware set. The little core handles the input hardware. It sends and syncs data to the big core, and the big core turns that data into a compatible format. And this way, the apps on big core can access the underlying input hardware seamlessly. No need to care about the lower hardware stuff. Compared to having separate input hardware for each core, our approach simplifies the software and reduces hardware costs. Since we are sharing the resource, we cut down on redundancy, which naturally brings down the cost. Additionally, the solution remains compatible with both Android and Vela input subsystems. Even if one core reboots or cracks, the overall input functionality remains available. To guarantee strong real-time performance, we use async cross-core communication for efficient data transfer, so input can respond really fast. For example, the delay for crown operations on the smartwatch can be kept under 10 milliseconds. Additionally, we have also restructured the cross-core device transmission protocol, RP message device protocol, while keeping capability with the original protocol. We have expanded its offloading capabilities to include services like input, battery, and GNSS. The new protocol now supports offloading not only between the little cores, but also between Android big core and little cores on our RTOS. Finally, I'd like to share the products we've launched and landed over the past few years, plus some of our future work for graphic and input subsystems. Over the past 2 years, the Vela team has rolled out several products with displays, including smart bands, smartwatches, smart panels, and a few other products. All of those products are built using our latest graphics and input features, and they really benefit from those capabilities. Finally, it comes to the future work. We'll continue stressing the graphic and input driver framework, enhancing both the functionality and performance. Now, and we'll keep improving our tools to more efficiently support upcoming tasks and long-term development. That's all my presentation. Thank you all for listening.